Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority full board meeting this morning. To begin, I'm going to ask my clerk today, who is also the CAO, to do the roll call.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Taddison.
Present.
Michelle Seaborn.
Present.
Patrick O'Neill.
Present.
Vice Chair Metcalf.
Present.
Diana Houston. Brian Grant.
Present.
Donna Cridlin.
Present.
Brad Clark. Member Clark. Chair Foster.
I'm here.
And we also have Member Beatty joining us today as the newly appointed member from Hamilton. Hey, welcome back. And we'll deal with that item on the agenda, but I've recorded that you are present at the meeting. Thank you.
Present. Okay, thank you. We'll do our acknowledgement. The Niagara Peninsula watershed is situated within the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Attawandaronk, and Anishinaabeg, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, numbers 3, 4, and 381, and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, the watershed is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Through the 2021 to 2031 strategic plan, we reconfirm our commitment to shared stewardship of natural resources and deep appreciation of Indigenous culture and history in the watershed. We'll move into the approval of the agenda. There is one item, it's going to be 1B or 1A, whichever you want, and that is correspondence from the City of Hamilton and an appropriate motion. Other than that, the agenda is set. Is there any other changes that anyone would like to make to the agenda? Seeing none, Member Taddison, could you move that we accept the agenda, and Member Metcalf, could you second that, please? Yep. Yeah. Looks like we're going to have some electronic challenges today. So we'll try, as we step through this, make sure that everything is working properly. So our 1A, and all those in favor? And that's carried. Our 1A is correspondence from the City of Hamilton, and as was already mentioned, Member Beatty has been selected as the citizen member from the City of Hamilton. So welcome this morning, Member Beatty, and so we need to do an approval of that, just that we have received this correspondence. Member Houston, could you move that? And Member Cridlin, could you second, please?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. Member Beatty has requested that he be on both the Finance and Governance Committees as well. So if nobody has any major objection to that, we will make sure that you are given the agendas, and we'll move into that. Member Grant, could I have you move that Member Beatty be put onto the Finance and Governance Committee?
Yes.
Thank you. And Member Metcalf, could you second that, please?
I second that motion.
Great. All those in favor? And that's carried. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, we do have some minutes that we have to approve, and the minutes of the full authority meeting from June the 16th, 2023, and also the closed session item from June the 16th, 2023. So, Member Seaborn, can I get you to move that we accept those minutes? And Member Taddison, could you second that, please? Are there any
Yes.
questions to the minutes or any clarification required? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Chair's update. I don't have a lot to add today, other than welcome Stu, and I'm glad that we're together again here at the NPCA. Enjoy the summertime. It seems we're having an amazing summer, and I'm sure Mr. Christie will be able to explain to us how heavily used all of our facilities are at some appropriate point. But anyway, it's looking like an absolutely beautiful summer. Correspondence. We do have some correspondence from the Conservation Ontario concerning Conservation Ontario submission in and around the Aggregate Resources Act regulatory and policy proposal changes. And that's on page 7 of your package. Can I get Member Cridlin to move that we approve this? And Member Grant, could you second that, please? Is there any questions to this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. We have no presentations this morning, we have no delegations, and we do have one consent item, so we shall deal with that at this point. And it's report number FA 3023, Compliance and Enforcement Q2 Statistics 2023. Member Seaborn, can I get you to move that we put that on the floor?
You can.
Thank you. Member Houston, can you second that, please? Thank you. Any questions or any comments to this particular report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Now we're going to move into our discussion items. The first item of discussion this morning is Rockaway Conservation Area Enhancement Project, an update and award of contract for parking area construction. Just let me get over to page 14. So, yeah. Director Christie, can you just give us a brief update on this, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. Excited to bring a board report today to talk about the update to Rockaway Conservation Area. For those that remember, we purchased the Rockaway Community Center property in August of 2022 and immediately took plans in short-term and long-term to enhance the conservation area. And today we have a contract award for your consideration to initiate construction and hopefully have the project done by end of October 2023.
Thank you. Are there any questions to Director Christie? Seeing none, can I get Member Metcalf to move that we accept this report? And Member Beattie, could you second that, please? All those in favor? That's carried. Next report is NPCA comments on the proposed provincial policy statement. So we'll start with Director Yates on this report, and if it's appropriate to any other staff members. So Director Yates, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you are our comments on the proposed provincial planning statement. This is a planning instrument that is combining the current provincial policy statement and the growth plan. It was released in phases. The natural heritage policies were not released with the first phase, and as a result, the province did extend a deadline for commenting on this particular Environmental Registry of Ontario posting and draft document. And the deadline is August 4th. So following endorsement today, that's what we're requesting. We will provide the appended letter and detailed comments through the ERO submission. We are also looking at how we can make our comments more available to the public through our planning and development website. So we've also been in discussions internally on that. With that, David DeLuce, the author of the report, is here as well. Should you have any comments on what we put forward today as our staff comments? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So any questions to this report? Member Beattie, please go ahead.
Yes, I understand that this is in the reading stage, the feedback stage, but if it were passed as it stands right now, do you have any idea on what type of impact that would have on the daily operations of the NPCA?
Thank you for the question through the chair. In our review, the natural hazard policies, for the most part, are unchanged. There was some changes to the preamble of that section that does speak to the need to consult and work and coordinate with the conservation authorities. That's being lifted out of that section and pulled up to the broader preamble of the document, so it's still there. And so we are supportive of that recognition of the coordination. The policies themselves on hazards remain unchanged. There are some updates to definitions around wave effects, so it's more broad instead of just the wave uprush component of it, which we also are supportive of. In our comments, we also want the province to continue recognizing our delegated role and responsibility to comment on planning applications as it relates to those hazard policies. That has been a long-standing delegated responsibility, and we feel in moving forward with this new planning statement that role should continue. We did flag some areas, more advisory and recommendation around watershed planning and the importance of that when it comes to municipalities planning for infrastructure, services, and growth, and that there is more of an emphasis on that in the current growth plan than there is within this proposed planning statement. It's more of a recommendation or suggestion in this document where it was a requirement under the growth plan. So we do have some comments recommending that continues, and we would support for those large and fast-growing municipalities to continue with watershed planning to inform growth, but also for all municipalities, because the statement does continue to recognize that the watershed is the context and the scope for planning, and that should continue. And our role as a conservation authority, as a resource management agency, research and science agency would continue to support those efforts of the municipalities in looking at watershed-wide research.
So am I correct from your answer that the effect on the NPCA and other CAs, the effect will be minimal?
Thank you for your question. For MPCA, I believe from my position it would be status quo in terms of the plan review function. For other conservation authorities and municipalities, in our partnership with Hamilton and Haldimand, as we've noted through Bill 23 and the changes of not commenting on natural heritage, that has changed and that's already in effect. So for some conservation authorities, with the additional release of the planning statement, there wouldn't be a review of the natural heritage policies related to Planning Act applications under MOUs, but we've already had that shift in Niagara, and we have been working with Hamilton and Haldimand on that transition. But as it relates to specifically the policy statement, I don't see major implications for us as a conservation authority to continue our role in natural hazard management.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Beattie. Any other questions? Seeing none, can I get Member Seaborn to move we approve this report?
So moved.
And Member Cridlin, could you second that, please? Any questions to the motion or anything else with the report? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Let's move on to our next report, FA 3223, and the update on NPCA Regulation Mapping Project. Director Yates, I believe that's still on your list.
Thank you, through the chair. Before you is a report requesting endorsement of the next phase of our regulation mapping update. Last year, our staff, as you know, focused on updating our policy document and our procedural manual. While we are doing that, in the background, we are also updating our mapping in terms of corrections, where there had been approvals, adjustments to our regulated mapping as a result of that, as well as doing a sweep to look at any errors that may be in the original mapping that was created. That phase 1 is substantially complete. We're working on finalizing that mapping and integrating it into our regulation mapping and posting that online for the public. The next phase that we're entering into is looking at our wetlands and our karst features. So last year, we updated our ecological land classification mapping that looks at all our natural features across the entire watershed. That did include wetlands. So that's a new, most updated piece of data that we have to inform mapping wetlands. We do know that there are gaps in our current regulation mapping on wetlands that was based on provincial mapping done in 2009. We do know through planning applications there are unmapped wetlands that we need to look at more comprehensively. So the phase 2 work plan will look at capturing those wetlands that currently aren't mapped, refining our current mapping based on best available data sources. There will be public consultation as a component of this. We are looking at least one in-person consultation and a virtual consultation, recognizing that this is watershed-wide and trying to spread the net as far as we can and capture engagement through the process. The karst mapping was started some time ago internally through research, and we're going to revisit that again and look to incorporating that within our mapping. The third phase will be coming later. We have a few mapping projects on the go that will inform that. We're updating our drainage mapping and our watercourse mapping. So once that's completed next year, then we can kick off the third phase of our mapping update, which will be valley lands, meander belts, and watercourses. So we're hoping 2025 will be the year that we get all of this completed and can roll out a full, consolidated, comprehensive update of our regulation mapping. We've also noted in the report as part of our policy review, we did look at several GGH conservation authorities to look at buffers and setbacks and hazard allowances. And we did note at the time that there was some inconsistency across the conservation authorities. In particular, we did identify that for us, we don't, in our regulation, identify a hazard allowance around our floodplain, where other conservation authorities include a regulated hazard allowance up to 15 meters. So that was one of the discrepancies at the time when we did the policy review, where we felt we haven't done enough technical analysis to inform moving the policy to look at hazard allowance around the floodplain. However, we do know that through the review and update that the ministry is making on Section 28 in our regulation, that they are looking across all conservation authorities for one regulation, and we're seeking endorsement from the board today to send correspondence to flag this to them and ask that they look at consistency across the conservation authorities in the new regulation, particularly when it comes to the floodplain. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I also have David DeLuce with us today as well.
Right, thank you, Director Yates. Any questions on this report? Member Cridland.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to staff. It sounds like quite a large undertaking that we're about to do, and in terms of it being watershed-wide, you know, for the, it's obviously very necessary, but for the public, when we do the mapping for floodplains, it ends up not being that much change. It's really just more accurate. So would it be it's probably too soon to know, but is it reasonable to think that the net change of the mapping volume, let's say, isn't really that much? It's just more correct when we're done this exercise. That was sort of one point to maybe just touch on. And then the process that we're probably going to be looking at doing, it'll probably also involve our public advisory committee. And then maybe the third thing we can get back to later, but I know that we still don't have our agricultural rep from the government, and maybe the next meeting we can get an update on when that's going to be in place, and that can also help support this work. So that's a few other comments there, if you can comment on maybe some of those. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. Definitely part of the exercise are revisions in terms of corrections and more accuracy in the mapping. It's difficult to say right now what the change would be in terms of new features that we would map. We do know on the wetlands there are unmapped features, and that is becoming apparent through planning and permit applications where our current screening mapping isn't showing a wetland, but when we see the air photography and go out on site, it's clear there's a wetland there. We just didn't capture it back in the day. And that's okay because our regulation, we go to the text of the regulation to regulate that feature, not the mapping. So it's difficult to say how much that mapping could change in terms of adding features, but it's sort of that two-prong of refinements, corrections, plus if we did miss anything in the first round to add those in. The second comment on the PAC, definitely we will include PAC. It's on their list that we presented to them when we met with them a few weeks ago. So that would be an item we would bring to them for their input.
Member Cridlin, anything else? No. Member Houston.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. So would we be prioritizing those unmapped areas then?
Through the chair, yes, we would be looking at our new ecological land classification mapping, any new mapping that's come from the province that we haven't incorporated yet, and doing that analysis to say, first sweep, are there big gaps in the mapping, and focusing on those areas to incorporate them.
Thank you for that. And a further question. In terms of completing this project, is this more a labor-intensive activity, or do you do a combination, can you use drones to try and capture some of these areas? I'm just curious how this actually takes place.
Yeah. Okay. It's a very good question. It's mainly a desktop GIS exercise. Through the ELC work, we already have done some field verification, so that work has substantially been completed through that exercise. So we would be looking at that data at a desktop level, but also overlaying other sources of information that could inform the process, such as soils information that can inform wetland types. So it would be a layering of data as the first step. And then, of course, we'd go to public consultation, and then there could be questions around specific areas that we'd have to look at in more detail. But for the most part, it would be a GIS desktop exercise.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question. I believe the report says that the existing mapping is from 2006, so that's
Correct.
In my view, seems quite old. I'm wondering with what kind of frequency should we be updating this mapping? I mean, 17 years seems like a long time.
Again, a very good question. It's not legislated in terms of a timeline that we have to do updates, say like a municipality and their official plans and zoning bylaw updates. However, there's some best practices that we collectively as conservation authorities through Conservation Ontario put together. And it's really driven by, best available information when that comes up. And it's up to the conservation authorities on when it's the appropriate time to do the update. But it is, as I've said, it is phased usually with conservation authorities because it does take quite some time. So conservation authorities currently are looking at updating their mapping. There have been a few that have already done some strategic updates, but a comprehensive update we're sort of at the same level as the other conservation authorities at this time. So it's a big project to tackle, if I can say it that way. So the frequency is more driven by when the Conservation Authority has the resources and the data has been updated and they're ready to do that comprehensive update.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, one more question. Oh, just escaped me. I can't remember. Never mind. I guess I'm good. Thanks.
When it comes back to you, we'll let you ask it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other questions to Director Yates at this point? There's a lot of interest in this project, of course, in and across municipalities as well. So perhaps a recommendation as we actually start the project up and see where things are going, making sure that there's correspondence going out saying, by the way, this project is now underway. Yeah. You know something? I think you just thought of what your question was. So Member Hewson, please go ahead.
It came to me. Okay. So you did mention that I guess a gap for us is when planning and development applications come in and we don't have an area mapped. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, are there other risks that as a board we should be aware of in terms of not having the information as up to date as possible?
Well, the risk is, I guess it's the perception of what the risk is on the side you're on. So for us, it's definitely the more information, the better, because then we can help provide the guidance, the direction to applicants and landowners on what's permitted on the property and where, and work with them on what they're proposing on the property. The risk from an applicant side is there is delay, right? And there could be costs. So they may be required to do additional studies to demonstrate whether the wetland is there. That's at a cost to them. And then in terms of delay and just the timing of getting that work done and submitting it. So, we did note in our report, the purpose of the update is not just to have the map and it's there, but it's also to improve the process. So with the best information, the most accurate mapping that we can have, the intention is also to meet our customer service and standard delivery standards. So continuing to meet those, but also look for continuous improvement, because then there's more certainty of what's on the site, and our staff are sort of armed with that information going into meetings or meeting on site to say, okay, I know what's here. This is what it is. It's a swamp. We know that for sure. This is the policy that applies.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hewson. I don't see any other questions. So with that, can I get Member Hewson to move that we approve this report on the update of NPCA regulation mapping project? And Member Taddison, could you second that, please? Any questions to the motion or any final comments on the report? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next report is concerning the research contract for the Welland River and Big Forks Creek Soil and Water Assessment Tool, modeling research project. Director Gagnon, your name is on that report at the tail end of it. Do you wish to make any comments at this point?
Through you, Chair, at this point I think I would defer to either Leilani or Jeff at this point, and if there are any financial considerations, I can certainly speak to those.
Thank you. Director Yates, any commentary on this?
Thank you, through the chair. This is one of our capital projects for this year. It is a partnership with the University of Guelph. It is a grant in aid research agreement that we are entering with them. It is a non-competitive contract, so therefore we do need to come to the board as per our policies. What this project will do is it will help us better understand non-point source pollution sources into our watercourses and the lakes. So this is a model that has been set up for other jurisdictions, including conservation authorities. It's been on our wish list for some time, and we're happy that we're able to move forward with it this year. It will also help inform several of our programs, such as restoration efforts, our stewardship efforts, our water quality monitoring. Also has benefits to looking at and running scenarios on different land uses or different mitigation or restoration that we could implement in our watershed, and what impact that may have in reducing those non-point source pollution loads. So it's very interesting, innovative research that will have many benefits to our programs and services. So it's just an example of the great work that our watershed strategies team does. So it's before you for approval so that we can move forward with the research project.
Thank you, Director Yates. Any questions? Member Houston.
Thank you, Chair. Can you give me an example of what a non-point, what was the wording? Source, a pervasive non-point source.
I will make an attempt, and then I may defer to Jeff or Kate or Tara, who's with us today. But this may be nutrient loading from agricultural operations. These are, loading into our water courses that we can't find the direct source. So it's not coming from an industry polluting. It could be from day-to-day operations, runoff that's occurring in our watershed, or it could be naturally occurring within our watershed as well. So I may take Tara. I think she's on. Tara, is there anything else you would like to add as some examples?
The University of Guelph has done this for several other conservation authorities. So taking the various land uses, using an agricultural layer or the urban areas, running the model helps identify where these non-point sources of pollution are coming from. So as Alani said, it could be from various day-to-day applications of fertilizer being used agriculturally. So the model could help us identify where best suited repairing wetlands or repairing habitat would help filter out those nutrients before they reach the watercourse. And we can use the model to apply various scenarios. So we could have various options within the subwatershed on how to mitigate the nutrient loading into the watercourse, which will benefit everything downstream from there.
Thank you. And I noticed restoration is part of this project. Is that in addition to the funds we're allocating on this project?
Thank you for the questions through the chair. Yes, the restoration program is separate from this project. This project, at the end of the day, may provide recommendations, and it's a tool that we can help identify areas to focus on for our restoration efforts. But the actual program is funded separately through the levy and other funding sources.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Houston. Any other questions or comments? Member Beattie, can I get you to move that we approve this report? Member Metcalf, could you second that, please? Any questions to the motion or anything else on this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Next report is concerning the Canada Water Agency and Canada-United States Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement funding opportunities. CEO Charma, I would like to turn to you first with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report FA 3423 was an update was requested, Chair, by yourself, and basically there's three main areas of interest in this report. One is to just bring the board up to speed on these recent commitments from the federal government on ongoing funding related to Great Lakes and new funding to establish a Canada Water Agency. And then secondly, we wanted to demonstrate the good work and partnership as delivery agents conservation authorities are doing on the ground and have been engaged on these activities over the past 20, 25 years or more since the initiation of this Great Lakes program. At this point, Conservation Authority is working with Conservation Ontario and several other Great Lakes-based conservation authorities to see how we can work together with other stakeholders like Great Lakes Cities Mayor's Initiative, and trying to see how we can leverage the funding to continue on the good work that we have already demonstrated on the ground. In the report, you'll see there's some great examples of the Conservation Authority work that have resulted in significant benefits on both sides. United States and America, with NPCA being a local watershed agency responsible for 2 Great Lakes on both sides and boundary waters in with the United States. We are well positioned, we think, to undertake some of this work, to continue the commitments under the Great Lakes water quality, and addressing the new and emerging threats to the water quality of Great Lakes. The report, Director Yates just talked about the water tool that we were talking about. These type of tools and science in our watershed really helps us understand what is causing to the impacts, nutrient loading and other things in Great Lakes, and how we can work with the community to help address those, whether it's through restoration or other stewardship activities on site. So we'll continue on with that work. At this point, I can report that we are working with Conservation Ontario to initiate discussions with some of the key stakeholders, like Great Lakes Cities Initiative, to see how we can advance this work locally as implementation agencies for the federal and provincial governments. Thank you, Chair, and I can take any questions.
Thank you, Chandra. Yeah, and I had requested Chandra bring this forward. There was kind of an implication at a recent regional council meeting that there's almost an implication that nothing's going on in this area. And in fact, I personally took a bit of offense to that as we went through this. So the whole idea of this is to make sure that we're very clear on what the NPCA is doing and making sure that we can do our good news story out there in these particular areas. Can I get Member Tattison to move this report and Member Seaborn to second it, please? Any questions to the report and or the motion? Member Hewson, please go ahead.
I just want to clarify, is the funding federal and provincial? Like it's coming from 2 different sources?
Through you, Chair. So through the inception of the Great Lakes Water Quality Program, both Canadian side and American side had committed funding for a certain amount of time. So that funding is coming to an end, soon. America has announced that they will continue this program. And on the Canadian side, this was a federal announcement at this stage. The province continues to commit to the Great Lakes Water Quality Program and the Canada-Ontario Agreement on Great Lakes Water Quality. And as you know, our remedial action program on areas of concern is funded through that. And we are the implementation agency for Niagara River Remedial Action Program. So at this point, the new funding has been announced through the federal government, and it's for 2 things. One is to continue their commitment on the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, as well as to establish this new Canada Water Agency to look into freshwater issues.
I think those are all very positive developments, but I saw provincially acknowledgement of investment. I was unclear. Is the province actually giving money towards this project?
The new funding has announced by the federal government, but the province continues to make their commitments to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. So, for instance, we have funding from what you saw in the release is funding for a remediation project under the RAP program that they have announced. They've given to the Conservation Authority, which is the Lions Creek update you saw at the last meeting. That announcements were related to that project, yeah.
I ask because sometimes the federal government gives the provincial government money, who then disperses it. So it's, you know, it's unclear to me if it's the province is actually giving the money or if it's actually coming from the federal government. So I just wanted to ask about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was at I'll go to you, Member Seaborn, in a second. I was at a discussion / photo opportunity, I guess, if you want to put it that way, with Member Oosterhoff this past week as well. And that was a re-announcement of a substantial amount of funding that we have received in and around our projects. So now re-announcement, 450,000 or something in that range, which was good. So Member Seaborn, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered, a lot of the communities that border the two Great Lakes are doing shoreline restoration initiatives and protection plans as well. Are we working in harmony with them, or are they running independent of what the NPCA provincial and federal plans are?
So through you, Chair, Member Seaborn, the good thing is that conservation authorities are all, the Conservation Authority bordering Great Lakes are all coordinated. They're working in conjunction. We also represent Conservation Ontario on various committees. I myself sit on the Great Lakes Management Plan Committee representing Conservation Ontario, and there's a similar committee on the Lake Erie side. And these are binational committees. So when I attend a meeting, there's United States representatives, reps from federal government, provincial government. So the work is pretty coordinated. It's a vast amount of work, and it's under various categories. So there's the nutrients, there's the lake management plan, then there's the shoreline piece and coastal wetlands piece. So sometimes for an individual who's coming into this, very complex to understand. But yes, I can say there's a lot of coordination happening among various agencies, at least on this aspect of the work. Now, conservation authorities, as mentioned in the report, do prepare shoreline management plans, as you know. And those are foundational pieces that we use to undertake our planning and permitting activities under the Section 28 responsibility for Conservation Authority. So those are foundational science pieces that tell you where is your hazard limit, how far you have to stay from that hazard, right? Beyond that, some conservation authorities have really taken a progressive look at climate change and other things. So the management plans we are now doing along shorelines, we call them coastal resiliency plan or coastal management plans, are now looking at how to address climate change and the new responses we are seeing from extreme weather. So they have nailed down a methodology. So now we're taking these plans, the foundational science piece, to the next level of integrating climate resiliency into shoreline planning. And then beyond that, we are also looking at where your high impact erosion and sediment areas are and how we can mitigate those. And those are individual projects. So I can tell you along Lake Ontario and Lake Erie shoreline, in my visits to various communities, I've seen 3 or 4 big erosion problems happening along both shorelines. And I think these are big multi-year projects that will take time to fully understand through an environmental assessment, looking at mitigation option and coming up with nature-based or hardened solutions, depending on where you are and what the right approach will be. So that's the whole thing, you have the science, you accommodate for climate change on the shoreline, and then you look at a mitigation project. The other challenge conservation authorities and communities have is a lot of our shoreline, it's both a challenge and opportunity, is under private ownership. So how do we work with our community and private landowners to give them the right tools, give them the right ownership and right strategies to address these things on their own property? And we sometimes do that through our permitting process when we ask for studies and, through our permit suggest the right remediation measure. On public properties, I think we have to demonstrate good planning and nature-based solutions along these shorelines. It was a long answer, but I wanted to give you all the information.
Thank you, Member Seaborn. Just as another comment, CAO Sharma and myself were at an IJC meeting back last year, and it was quite fascinating because we were dealing with the Americans, and we had Natalie Green doing a presentation at that point in time on what we're doing in some of these areas. And they just kind of shook their heads saying, oh my goodness, like you guys are light years ahead of us. And the reality is that it's much more complex in the US when they're looking at doing these types of things. And it really goes to the state level as opposed to the local level that we have here. So I think that's a good thing as well. Can I get Member Metcalf to move that we approve this report, and Member Beattie, could you second that, please? Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Before we go any further, Director Christie, you have an announcement on one of our staff members that I think we should point out to our board.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is with mixed emotions today that I announce the retirement of Rob Currett, who is the manager of Balls Falls. This will be his last meeting. Rob has been with the NPCA for 38 years. Mostly between managing Balls Falls and Chippewa Creek Conservation Area. But Rob has led many projects and done incredible enhancements to so many of our properties. Also, I think a record-breaking involvement in the festival for 34 years. I'm not sure anybody will ever achieve that. But other than Rob's amazing day-to-day and what he does, he's also known as a mentor to a lot of us, including myself. So I just want to thank Rob for his service with the NPCA and wish him a great retirement.
Rob is here, sitting.
Rob, do you want to say anything to us?
Yeah, just thank you, and thanks, Adam, for the kind words. And it's been an honor and a privilege to be here for all these years, and I'm very grateful.
You do realize I'm going to be bringing very unhappy news to my son Scott. He talks of you glowingly from everything that he's worked with you on. So anyway, you're going to have one person that really misses you there too. So let's move on to committee reports. We have the Governance Committee and the Public Advisory Committee. So let's start with the Governance Committee. Member Tattison, can I get you to move the minutes of that committee? And Member Seaborn, could you second that, please? Any questions to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Public Advisory Committee, they had the first meeting July the 5th. They haven't chosen a chair yet for that committee, but that was the first get-together of that committee. Member Hewson, can I get you to move that we accept these minutes? And Member Cridlin, can I get you to second that, please? Any questions or comments to the minutes? All those in favor? That's carried. There's no motions at play this morning. Are there any notices of motion anyone wishes to bring forward? Under new business, I'm going to ask Member Hewson, can you give us a brief update on the foundation?
Big news, everyone. I'm the chair of the foundation now. Woo! Yes, I'm happy about that. And we did talk about, we actually brought in a big donation, which was great. And we also have a new staff member who will be joining us. I'm not sure if we can talk about that yet. Not yet. So that's a to be announced, TBA. But, you know, very excited about that because, you know, we did have some hiring woes as we went through the process in trying to get somebody on board and commit to the position. But we have a commitment now and we have a plan. And I think that the committee is really excited to kind of get started and do some great things for the authority. So that's all I have. Did you want to say one more thing, Donna? Two board members. I'm sorry, I forget their names. Brett Harrington and Doug Wilson. Yes, and everyone's very enthusiastic. So I think we're going to do some good things this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hughes, and thank you for stepping up into that role. Just want to pass along back to the foundation member or Chair Encina did a great job over the 4 years that he was dealing with that particular role as well. So, but he has passed it off to an appropriate person. So, is there any other new business anyone wishes to bring up this morning? We don't have a closed session. So with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Have a great day.